Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to another Both Sides episode. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Gold Coast #1 agent, director and founder of Kollosche, Michael Kollosche himself.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for making the trip too.
Thank you for joining us. This has been a very last minute thing for us. I was just telling Michael the story about how this came about. So we've tried to get Michael on a few times, and I was coming up here for a holiday, and Daniel had just landed from Peru, and I messaged him and I said, Michael said yes. I said, and I'm flying up, I'm literally taking off the ground and messaging Daniel saying, I'm taking off. I'm not going to have any reception. No matter what happens, you have to drive up right now. And he did. So here we are. My first question for you, Michael, being the #1 agent on the Gold Coast, selling the most premier real estate, how do you stick to just that prestige market if you have clients that want us to sell a $10 million, $20 million property with you, but then they also have an investment property which may be worth $1 or $2 million, but they want you as the agent?
Look, I think initially you need to understand what your brand stands for so that you can build an attraction business. Within our organisation, we still do transactions down as low as probably 1.5. Our average sale price across the entire business is sort of late 3s to 4. But we have a lot of collaboration, so a lot of joint listings. We'll work together. So in that instance, if I had a client that specifically wanted me to oversee it, I'd keep an eye on it, but I would obviously collaborate with the area specialist or someone who's working that market. So fortunately, when we set up the business, we developed a lot of systems and processes. So no matter whether or not you've got a $1.5 million property or a $30 million property, you still have the same experience, the same level of reporting. Everything is done exactly the same. And so from that side of it, both buyer and seller are always going to be treated exactly the same, whether it's with me or anyone else in the business for that matter.
How have you been able to position yourself as that premier agent in the prestige market and cut through that? Was there a particular sale or particular moment that made that happen for you?
Look, I think it's consistency. I think it's real estate is a long-term game. So it's about building long-term relationships. It's positioning yourself as a trusted advisor to all of your core market and your core clients. And people are pretty astute. They can see through those that are just only attached to a fee and trying to move through it relatively quickly. Like, you take a long-term view and look at how you can help people, give them the right advice on this journey, because most people these days will only transact on a property every 3, 5, 7 years, depending on where they are, who they are. And so a lot of them come to us for advice. Even some of the more experienced property developers in the Gold Coast will still come and sit down with us and realise that they should get input on market trends and what the market's looking for. You will occasionally get others that'll come from interstate that think they know everything, and what works down there doesn't necessarily work up here and can sometimes be costly lessons for them. But from our perspective, we just take that long-term approach, and you won't win every transaction, and sometimes you're telling people not to sell, and sometimes you're positioning them that they should be selling in a certain market and doing other things, or divesting one asset for another because they're going to have better opportunities by having liquidity in certain things, or whatever it might be. So it's just, if you take that longer term approach and the customer always wins, you can't lose.
Sounds like long term is very important to you, Michael, but when you first started out, because doing some research, it sounded like you didn't really prospect, like door knocking, phone calls, you hated it. How did you build a brand that's an attraction-based business?
Look, I think
while still playing the long game.
Yeah, you have to provide an experience that people rave about. I think, unfortunately, some parts of the real estate industry is very egotistical. Everyone seems to think they're a celebrity, and it's more about them than it is about the clients. For us, it's about the customer experience. So it's about the advice you give them, Obviously, breaking into those first big transactions in my youth were challenging, up against industry veterans that have been there and doing it for a very long time. But it also creates an opportunity because most industry veterans are complacent. It's just another $10 million sale. It's just another $5 million deal. I find all the time that they dismiss people because they're just used to it and complacent and not as hungry as they used to be. They're not as relentless with their follow-up. So that in itself creates an opportunity for number 2, number 3, number 5 in the industry to come in, providing they have the discipline, they have the work ethic, they have humility, and they're prepared to service the client. So I picked up one just the other day that which was quite surprising because it was a big sale for a specific agent, but the buyer had been chasing them and made a couple of calls to try and get through the property. They never returned their call. Maybe they were on holidays. It had become an open listing. I'd already pitched for the business a while ago, but that agent had quoted a very high price in order to secure the business, and the seller thought, well, all right, I'll give him a go, and picked his agent based on things that he couldn't control. And ultimately, the listing expired, became an open listing. The buyer walked into my open home down the road, said, look, I don't really like this, but I do like that. I've rung the agent, they didn't return his call, and so I rang the owner, took him down, sold the property for $9.5 million. So that's a $285,000 call that they missed because people get complacent. And look, it happens everywhere, and they're the things as an agent you need to check. You need to have the disciplines. It's a responsibility when you take on someone's listing. So, and I see it. I know it's happened in Sydney. I've had clients that go down there and they're dealing with some people that we spoke about earlier. And I won't mention any names, but they dismissed them and didn't think they had capacity to buy on the harbour down there. So I rang them and passed them on to Simon Cohen, and he went and sold them something and sent me a check. So so it's about not, I guess a lot of people not making those judgment calls on people. You do your homework, you treat everyone really well, you provide a really good level of service. And some of the clients that have spent the most amount of money with me over the years started off at a very basic level, but still got really well looked after and really well serviced, and they continue to come back.
How is someone supposed to beat you when it's a public holiday? We were at your property doing a property video. We're now here at your office doing a podcast. It's a public holiday. You're the number 1 agent already. How is anyone actually supposed to beat you when you're still out working your competition and you're number 1?
Real estate's a lifestyle. Like
A lifestyle.
Like if you love it, you'll never work a day in your life. And I really enjoy what I do.
Especially that property today was pretty nice.
It wasn't hard to get.
Driving an Aston Martin looking good.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't hard to go up.
But look, I actually enjoy it. I jump out of bed every morning. I'm excited. I enjoy it. I enjoy the interactions. I enjoy the business. I now enjoy developing people, as I have been for the last 5 or 6 years within the business, watching their success. I have a bit of a competitive bone in my body, so I don't like to be beaten. And it's interesting because there's certain people in our market that I find lack morals, integrity, that do reasonably well and have a reasonable amount of market share. But I'm grateful for them because they make me want to be better. They make me want to drive harder, and so I learn from those, and I get inspiration from those. So it's great.
Touching base to the development of your agents, do you want to bring up those stats again?
Yeah.
Just about, we've done some research.
Well, the last bit of data I got from you is you had 19 agents write over 1.1 million, 12 of them over 2.2, 7 over 3.3, 3 of them over 4.4, 2 over 5.5, and you exceeding 10 mil.
Yep. Mental.
That's a year. That's old data. I'm sure that
I haven't seen that data before. I haven't seen an office like that.
Look, we have a group of high performers where we've got a group of high performers, and we're very specific about who we bring into the business. Our goals now are to have the highest level of market share across the entire Gold Coast with the smallest amount of people. So we're not here to build the biggest business where they're clamoring all over each other. Like a lot of businesses these days, they don't collaborate. Their culture's terrible. They're all insulated. They don't share. They don't have this abundance mentality. And so that's something that we've been really focused on maintaining and fostering and nurturing. So the key to this is to make sure that across every market that we want to play in, we maintain a really strong market share. We all work together. There's no point having 10 people in the office that are clamoring over the top of each other in one market, as a lot of other businesses do.
So do you set core pockets and core patches, and no one in the office can touch that patch besides a particular agent?
So we run an open database, but what that means is that everyone has specific core areas that they have to work, but they're still entitled to work relationships. So if you meet someone in the normal course of business, you're entitled to deal with them. But if you haven't met them in the normal course of business and they're not in your core business development area, BDA, then you can't go and cold call someone else's data.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's the same way.
So what would be your advice then to somebody who's coming into the industry, who wants to be a multi-million-dollar writer? What would be your blueprint to become an attraction agent? How do you get your first $10 million listing?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. You have to understand this business before you can excel at it. So you have to understand the process. You have to really understand your market, your data, everything to become a professional advisor on it. So you need to do the groundwork, but it doesn't necessarily need to take you 3, 5, 10 years to do it. You can expedite that. Access to information, everything you need is online these days. So you need to become an expert on the area, the type of property, whatever it is that you're working. So you should be able to walk or drive past every single property in that area and know it inside and out. You should understand the town planning, the height, the zoning, average sale price, turnover. You should be able to nearly recite every single sale that's occurred in there. You should know the majority of the owners throughout that area. And if you can do that, it's actually a really simple, easy game. You go and pick 1,500 homes with an average sale price of $4 or $5 million and build relationships with those people and nurture those relationships and give them hyperlocal relevant content. Just listed this. We thought you might be interested to know we've just sold this. We're having an open home down the road and we thought you may be interested. Whatever it is, here's our quarterly market report that details all the sales in the area. Here's what else is happening. Here's a K Insights report that we distribute, which is economic data on the economy as well. Just give them hyper-local relevant information. Don't spam them with shit that they don't want to hear, receive. They don't want to know about something that's sold on one end of the Gold Coast when their property is in central Gold Coast that's completely irrelevant to them. If you just treat people with respect and you give them information that actually is valuable to them, you will nurture the relationship. You don't need to go in with commission breath. Everyone goes in, they're banging on the doors, they're harassing them, they're chasing them for their business consistently, constantly, and people don't like that. They get frustrated. You own a prestige home on the Gold Coast. So many times, like some people get door knocks 3, 4, 5, 10 times a week. Like that becomes frustrating from different agencies. I spoke to a client a couple of weeks ago and he said that they'd left their front door open and they were playing out the back on the river. And an agent decided to walk through the home and introduce themselves out on the yard. And it's like,
way.
Like, wow. They don't set the barrier to entry very high in this industry, but people don't like that. And I spoke to another client that was driving down in the gate down into the basement, and they sort of slipped in behind him to go down and talk to him in the basement. He's like, mate, if I wanted to talk to you, I'd take your calls. So a lot of people typically try and harass them because they've got this commission breath rather than taking a long-term view, building a relationship with people, giving them information that's relevant. They appreciate it, and then when they want to do business with you, they'll call you. It's not difficult.
What video? You've got some real high performers within your business, and we've actually got a couple of them coming on in November, which is exciting. What do you think separates your high performers compared to the rest of the marketplace? Are they working longer hours than most?
Oh, look, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. So it's having really good systems and processes, being really disciplined, knowing where to put your time and energy. If you're building long-term relationships with people, you're having quality conversations rather than these constant rejection and cold call conversations, which can become a little bit debilitating. And I guess from that perspective, your energy becomes quite low, drained. Like
Not fun.
no, it's not. And then your conversations become worse. And so, like from our perspective, the guys and girls that are performing at a high level, they're always on. Their follow-up's impeccable. They say they're going to do something, they follow through on it. Like their level of reporting is great. They know, like they'll go and sit down with people. I was with someone yesterday, a client, and I just sat down with them and I said, look, unfortunately in this job and this business, I have to sometimes sit down and have hard conversations with good people. And this is one of those times. And it was up to me to tell them that their expectations were well above the market and they can either be on the market or in the market. But if they want to divest this asset because they've purchased something else and moving elsewhere, then they need to actually realign it with the market price. So, and it's being able to have those conversations in a non-threatening manner and still being able to support whatever decision they make. So ultimately, I'm here to advise you, but if you decide you want to keep it and hang on to it, no problem.
When it comes down to coaching and training and mentoring your staff, how are you able to do that on such a scale?
Look, I think it's a lot of training, a lot of systems, processes. Most of this business comes down to like for us, we've developed a system. Whenever we list a property, there's about 42 steps, I think it is, from the time I list it to the time it goes live. So
42.
and basically, I come in, I hand the appointment to one of the team, and then they go through and do all that. And then the next time I'm at the property is when it's live.
Wow.
So you've got to be able to, like, it's no longer an individual game, it's a team sport. So you've got to be able to structure it properly where you've got the right people, they've got clearly defined roles, everyone knows what they need to do, they know what part of the cog in the chain they are, and you can throw things over your shoulder and know that various people are going to catch it. You've got good communication. But back to your previous point, like you've got to keep the sales team focused on talking with buyers and sellers. So they shouldn't be doing all of the $30, $50 an hour work. They should be out there doing the real dollar productive stuff and making sure they're servicing the clients at the coalface whilst everyone else behind the scenes is pedaling like crazy.
Well, if you were to start again and focus on the high dollar producing activities, let's say you were to come to Sydney and crack into the eastern suburbs, what would be your high, if you were to restart, long game in mind, but have not sold a property, what would be your blueprint there?
Oh, look, I think it's like if you're going to buy a real estate franchise, as an example, in an area that you don't know. Never done it, but I assume that the first thing for me to do would be I want to understand the size of the market. How much does it turn over? How many properties? What is the current market share? How many people are playing in that area? So that I understand the viability of it. So it'd be exactly the same. I'd go down there into a market, I'd look at it, I'd want to understand how often do they turn over? What's the average fee? How many people are playing in it? How competitive is it? How big a market do I need in order to achieve the goals that I want to achieve financially? And then based on that, is that doable? And then I'd go around and I'd want to understand all of it, the history, the key players, the architects, the designers, build the network. And then you give me one great listing in that market and I'll turn it into a business.
One listing into a business?
Yeah, off the back of that, you'll meet a lot of people, you market it properly. I had 5 years off and came back into the real estate business in 2016. I walked out, hadn't had any interactions with anyone other than people I'd see around town and say hello to, and then came back and the first transaction I did was for 13.25 million, and then the next one was 25.
So how did you get that first one for 13.5?
It took, I had to go back, talking through all of my previous clients that were actually on the market with other agents, and then a lot of them, yeah, we'll give it to you open listed, oh, we'll do this, but basically previous experience and results didn't count for anything, so I just had to keep hustling until I got one, and then based off that, took it on my terms, took it with the right level of marketing. I think we had about an $80,000 marketing campaign, and then the next one we did was about $120,000 marketing campaign, and ultimately launched the business from there. So, but one thing goes into another. You meet people, your brand builds, and if you focus on getting the right results for people, and being a seller's agent, because ultimately the sellers pay the bill. If you can get the best price, like no one wants an order taker. No one wants someone that can actually get a result that the owner could get themselves. So you need to add value. So you need to be able to add value above the market. You need to be able to persuade someone why they should be paying more for this property. And the more value you add, the more money you make, the more business you get, and it continues to come. So it's not an exact science, but it's our job as a salesperson to extract the best price that we can for a seller.
Otherwise, they're better off just selling it themselves.
Exactly.
Selling themselves in commission.
When you joined the industry about 2016, did you have the long term in terms of how you'd like to build the business back then, or did it organically build?
No, so I started with a business partner for a couple of years, and the business grew quite organically. We were just going to do 50 square metres with a couple of us and have a bit of fun and just play around with it. And then I think we grew to maybe 25 people, something like that. And but the environment wasn't conducive to where I wanted to be. And so I made a decision in mid-2018 that I was going to go and start my own. And I did on the 1st of January 2019. And it allowed me to build it the way that I wanted to, with the systems, the process, the structure, the people, and create the environment that I wanted to, and off the back of that, we have the business we have now. So,
if you were to give tips to the younger agents that are starting to come through now, and starting to break off and from being under an agent to being their own agent, what would be your best piece of advice for these guys?
Treat it as a career.
As a career?
You need to learn this business. You need to understand everything. You need to be an authority on it in order to be able to give people the right advice. Like, look how long, like most of us make more than surgeons, more than heart surgeons, more than some of the best doctors in the country. But they study for 10, 12 years, some of them, in order to be able to do that. Now, the access to information allows us to, if you are serious and disciplined, to upscale pretty quickly. And within a couple of years, you can become a really, really good agent within this business and within this industry.
So you said you were working yesterday. You worked today. So do you work?
Not difficult though, is it?
It's not when you're walking through homes like that, mate.
Saturday night at 8:30, Sam and I were putting together a deal at Benoa, putting the sold sticker on in the dark. So but as Sam said to me when we were driving, you don't sleep until the deal's done. And back in the days before social media, before emails, before all that sort of stuff, when we started, and I'm not that old, but yeah, maybe. We used to be up till 11, 12, sometimes 1, 2 in the morning, running back from buyer to seller, driving from house to house, signature on a piece of paper, go back, put in the fax machine. It was like, that's just the way it was, and you wouldn't stop till it was done. It was a lot harder. Like, I think we had mobile phones back then, but it was.
A lot of agents talk about balance, finding that balance, that sweet spot where they have their time off, 1 day a week, whatever it may be.
It's critical. You've got to have it. You've got to enjoy what you do, but you've got to have a balanced life. So,
What does balance look like for you?
And health and wellness is important. So you've got to look after your health. Like everyone these days, back in the old days, it was sort of, everyone used to party, carry on, and it was a bit sort of Wolf of Wall Street, and real estate was rough, and there was sort of the really old over the hill has-beens, and then there was that'd sit at the bar most weekends, and then there was those that used to party, and it was now a lot of really high performers and good businesses. It's health, it's well-being, it's families, it's all those things that create balance. To me, I've got routine sets me free. So every single morning, I'm up at 4:30.
4:30?
Every morning without fail. So from 4:45 through till 6 a.m, I'll go for a walk, And then from 6 a.m. till 7 a.m. on 6 days a week, I'll train with my personal trainer. And then a few days a week, I'll go and do a cold plunge, steam, sauna before work, go upstairs, breakfast, get ready, take my time, and then off into the office, usually by 8:30, 9 o'clock. So
time do
I
you
enjoy
finish?
that routine. I'm usually at 5 unless I'm putting a deal together.
Yep.
So I do. I get 2 massages a week, Monday and a Wednesday. I see an osteo at on a Friday morning, 7 o'clock till 7:45. I'll see the chiro once a month, and all of this is just for health and wellness, preventative usually. So do all those things just to make sure you look after yourself. You make sure you eat healthy. So we've got one life.
Do you get sick often?
What's that?
Do you get sick often?
Not really, touch wood. So no, but I try and look after myself. So it allows you to operate without having the effects of stress. Meditation's good. So I've done a lot of that in my life, probably not as often as I should, but I used to go and do trips to India with a guy from Sydney that I'd do every few years, and we'd go over there. So I did 4 of those, and that was like a full detox: no meat, no chicken, no fish, no coffee, no gluten, no sugar, no devices, and you'd go through and do transcendental meditation, yoga, all sorts of stuff, colonics, the whole lot.
Colonics,
and you'd come back and like you'd feel brand new, 10 years younger.
Wow.
But these days, I don't tend to carry a lot of stress anymore because as you get older, you realise that this too shall pass.
That's it.
So many people put so much pressure on themselves and frustration and stress, but you've got to be solutions based.
Yeah.
So the key to it is to think about, like, you don't want to be sitting there in a pity party talking about the problem and just dwelling on it and burying your head in the sand. It's like, okay, how do we get through this? How do we navigate it? What's the quickest outcome? What's the best solution? And you know what? Complete ownership over everything is critical. So for us, actually, I sat with Tony O'Doherty recently on a speaking gig with Justin Nickerson, and he's from Brisbane, and he said, and I completely agree. He said, "I've never lost a listing to another agent." He said, "I lost it to myself.
Oh.
I lost it to the version of me that didn't turn up.
Oh, the version of me that didn't turn up.
I lost it to the version of me that wasn't prepared, that didn't have the right energy." And you know what? You take that complete ownership into everything you do. When there's a customer complaint, what could I have done differently to avoid that? What can I do differently to make sure it never happens again? How do we improve the outcome, the experience for them? When we lose a deal, another agent sells it. Why? Because you didn't make the extra call, you didn't make the notes, you didn't have the discipline, you didn't follow through. What gives us an entitlement to commission over something where we've been lazy? So that you've just got to take ownership. Every time you miss something, what was the actual reason why I missed that, why it happened, and how can I ensure it doesn't happen again?
What do you think the main number one reason is that agents lose listings? To you?
I think for a lot of agents, unfortunately, they don't understand the process, they don't get the training, they don't get the support. So the only way they win the business is to walk in and promise the world. They tell an owner, "Oh, I can get you this ridiculous figure," that they have no idea how they're going to achieve, and they do it based on hope. A lot of them will go in and pay for marketing, and a lot of them will lower their fee in order to try and get a chance, but they don't understand the system, the process, in order to make it as easy as possible for a buyer and seller to say yes. I won't give away all my secrets, but ultimately that's where a lot of them fail. They create unrealistic expectations. They then disappoint the seller. Like, you go in and buy the business by giving someone a ridiculous figure, or you don't have a level of commitment from them because you've paid for all their marketing. They'll go through the process. They'll come out the other end. In most instances, if they haven't got seller fatigue and they haven't been beaten so badly that they finally throw in the towel, they'll end up getting frustrated, and then they'll look for another alternative. So, I don't believe anyone can ever promise a price. We can turn around and give a whole heap of comparable and historical sales that may support a value, But ultimately, we can never determine what a buyer is going to think a property's worth until they come through and until we create the competitive environment that ultimately drives the best price out of them.
I completely agree, and that's why I love the fact that Queensland, you cannot give out a price guide for auctions, where in Sydney, we'll have a $2 million house and the price guide's 1.4. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And so what you find up here is that we provide a really detailed list of comparable sales, but our job's actually to gather bidders. So if we continue to try and sell it to everyone that walks in the door by telling them the vendor wants this price, when buyers will obviously buy with emotion, justify with logic. So everyone will walk in with a logical price as to where they would like to buy it. If you take their emotional price off them before the auction day, most times they won't turn up. So the key is to get their logical price, lock them in, and then just keep gathering bidders. Get them into an environment where they have fear of loss and they're going to lose it, fear of missing out on the property. They see multiple people holding paddles, gives them social proof, and that creates the competitive environment. So, and we never know what it's going to sell for. Like I see time and time again where things sell for considerably over reserve. We had one the other day down at Hedges. It was a duplex, and we ended up with 3 registered bidders on it. It was a private auction. We had an offer at 9 million and another one at 10 million prior to auction. One of the buyers went and got Heron Todd White mortgage valuer to come through and have a look at the property. That valuer said he felt it was worth between 9 and 9.5 with a midpoint of 9.25. But if you pay over 10, you're crazy. Now, we'd already had 10 from another buyer, locked both of them in. They all turned up on the day, and it ended up selling under the hammer for 11.6 to the guy who had the valuer come through. Now, he rang me afterwards and he said, "How the hell did you get me to pay that?" I said, "I didn't. You just paid 40,000 more than someone else." So he wasn't negotiating with me. He wasn't negotiating with the seller. He just got into a competitive environment with someone else who turned up wanting to pay 10.5 but didn't want to miss out on it. And then between them, they created social proof, which drove the outcome. So that's the key.
Do you have a preferred style of selling on the Gold Coast or in certain price points?
Look, ultimately it depends on the property and the market, but auctions are probably the first method of sale that we will always recommend. If a property's been to market multiple times, then it can prove challenging if they've had failed auctions and a bad experience with other agents who typically just don't understand how to execute and or how to handle the inquiry, or they're not disciplined enough to actually stick to the process. So that can make it more challenging, because once a listing goes stale, trying to attract fresh interest, reignite previous interest can be a little bit difficult, but we've had plenty of results where we've proven that we can do that and outperformed with some exceptional results, but it does make it challenging. So sometimes, like I've got one I'm talking to at the moment that have had 2 failed auctions with another agent, and we're thinking, do we price this now in order to try and get it done, and then obviously put together all the due diligence and sales evidence that supports the price. Don't know. So it's case by case, depends on vendor's motivation, depends on timing. If they've got any time constraints, there's a whole heap of things to it. So.
When it comes down to pitching on the big listings, are you up against many agents often? Is it every listing, or do you go in uncontested?
No, look, there's always plenty of times where you're going up against other competitors, and look, some agents will obviously go in and promise the world and pay for marketing, and you won't always win everything. And it's making sure that you understand your own worth and your value there. So we obviously only take on and carry as much stock as we can in order to make sure that we can actually service it properly at any given time. But we understand that most of it will go full circle and come back in our lap, like the one that you saw this morning.
So with the rest of the agents and associates within your office, you might finish around 5, but you've done all the hard yards now. A lot of the younger guys and girls in your office, are they finishing at 5 as well, or are they working later?
Look, some of them are working later. It depends. I was talking to one of the ladies this afternoon who's out putting a deal together at the moment, and it really comes down to discipline. Like real estate, as I said, it's a lifestyle. You don't sleep. So you can be as responsive with all your inquiries. Like, people appreciate it. So an inquiry comes in, you're back to them within a couple of minutes, then they're like, wow, they're on the ball. And you should be following them up until they buy or die. And that's the key. And unfortunately, too many people don't. They get complacent. They write them off. Not for you. They don't ask if they've got something to sell. They don't dig deeper. What else have you had a look at? Did you like anything? Have you made offers on it? Why didn't you buy it? Like, drill down. The more questions you ask, the more information you can get, the better you can align yourself to them and actually make sure that you can get closer to a deal. So without understanding people's motivations or what it is that they're looking for, you'll never really get as far as you need to. So,
Talking about motivations, what would you say your motivation is at the moment?
My motivation at the moment, I just, as I said earlier, I enjoy getting up and doing what I do.
Yeah.
I enjoy the interactions. I find it fun, stimulating. I do enjoy the thrill of the deal and putting stuff together. And so I think having someone come and challenge you, or like, very rarely am I number 2 on the board in the office, even though I'm running the business and doing a million other things, because I don't like to lose, and it's fun, and it's just, for me, the greatest thing that could happen in the business is that everyone else gets to the similar level and outperforms me. Like, I'd be quite happy, as long as I didn't go backwards, I'd be quite happy to see that. So, and I want to drive the best out of them.
It seems like you care about your staff a lot. We've gone through this beautiful office. You've really set it out very nicely for your staff. You've got a kitchen, wellness, like, you've got fruit there available. Everything's here. Everything is available here. Why do you think you care about your staff so much?
I think that, for many reasons, but one, it's probably within my nature, but I think also, if people have great health and fitness, a really fantastic home life, mentally all their issues are being resolved and dealt with. Like, we've got a transformational wellness coach that works in the office full-time that's been with us for 5 years. So she works with people on mental health. She works with them on meditation, yoga, breath work, couples counselling, bereavement leave, all that stuff. And she's helped many of them through their own issues that they might have, or self-sabotage, or things that they do to prevent them from performing at their best. And sometimes it's a narrative that they're telling themselves, that they don't think they're worth it, or like there's actually, Andrew won't mind me talking about it. He joined the business 5 years ago. He was probably about 54 at the time. His biggest year in real estate was $350,000. He tried running his own business as well. He wanted to come and join us after we'd had multiple conversations. Really nice guy, great temperament, but he used to self-sabotage his success, and he'd get to a level and then do things that just would bring it undone. And so when he was coming to join us, I said, look, go and spend some time with Annetta. It's on me. She'll bill me for it, but when she says you're ready to join, then you can join. And so she worked with him for 4 months before we actually gave him a start. He got him off the alcohol, got him fit, got him healthy, got him training, worked through a whole heap of childhood traumas and different things that were holding him back and causing him to self-destruct or self-sabotage. And then off the back of that, he came in his first 12 to 18 months, did 2.7 million in fees. So the only thing that changed was his mindset, the way that he approached his days, his discipline, his behaviours, and he already had the skill set. He had like, he was a lovely guy and had empathy and humility, but it was just 1% tweaks. And so if you can do that for people and help them, then you'll obviously get the best results out of them. But having that genuine care for people, like, for me, I would hate to let any of them down where they felt they had to leave the business because I hadn't delivered on anything that I'd promised, or they didn't feel that they could come and talk with me. So it's my goal is to try and drive the best out of them, and I get really fulfilled when I see the results that they have and how they grow. And so it's just trying to make sure you've got enough time to look after everyone.
Especially when you got that many staff, right?
Yeah.
What From your experience, what's been the biggest thing you've had to work on that was a limiting belief from yourself? And how did you navigate that?
Look, I think from my perspective, you learn a lot of lessons as you go through life. So I lost both my parents actually at a younger age to cancer. So I didn't have a lot of grey hair around me. I was quite trusting when I was young. I used to go into business relationships and trust that other people would treat me the same way that I would treat them. And so I learned a lot of lessons. And so now it's understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are. And so I have certain people within the business around me that are much better at things than I am. And their role is to report on those, make sure they follow through on them, whether that be recruitment. I'd give a job to everyone and see the best in them if it was up to me. But having those checks and balances there where we actually sit down and rationalise and work with them. So it's that was probably the biggest weakness that I had. Outside of that, I don't think anyone can outwork me. If I want, I don't think they can outcompete. If they go up against me on my best day, and I really want something, it's very rare that I will lose, but sometimes I will be focused on other areas and I don't really have anything to prove to myself anymore. So it's more around just getting fulfillment out of helping everyone else and starting to get a lot of juniors coming through now into the business. My son's just about to finish school this year, and some of his mates that are doing traineeships with us, and so that's sort of the next tier of how do we help with some of those. And
how do you transition from being the big writer in the office to then having the other agents take over? How's that going to make you feel, do you think? Because you're very competitive.
Extremely happy. So
be a very competitive.
yeah,
right?
look, I'm competitive, but I collaborate with everyone. So to help grow those people within the organisation and to lead from the front, I have collaborated on most transactions. I do work with them, and that way they get to see how I operate. I get to learn things from them on the way, and knowing that you don't know everything is probably just as important. So like I learn stuff from some of the guys and girls through the business in junior roles all the time. And so it's a key trait that you've got to make sure that you're happy to work with them, you're happy to collaborate. What goes around comes around. Have that abundance mentality. Create reciprocity where everyone in the business shares. And if you can nurture that, everyone will win. Like I got one of the guys in the office who actually started with me 4 years ago, I think, it was 4 years ago. So he lost his restaurant businesses during COVID. So Marco, him and I went to school together, and he wanted to join the business. I'm like, mate, look, we're high performers. We only take experienced people at this stage. And he's like, kept chasing me, and anyway, he was. We used to live together after school. We knew each other quite well. So so I got to the point where he was ringing the doorbell, and he came in, spoke to my wife, and I was in bed, and then the next thing they came up, started jumping on my bed and said, I want to come to the office. My wife left, and we sat down and had a chat, and he said, I just want my kids to be proud of me. And at that point I knew he was ready to go. So I said, okay, meet me Monday morning. We'll have a meeting at the office. So I sat down, brought him in, even though we were best mates, sat down in the office with my GM at the time, my sales director at the time, HR, and just said, we're going to give him a go. We don't normally bring people in with no experience. We will give him every bit of support that we can to help him succeed. But if he doesn't write 330,000 GCI in his first 12 months, no exceptions, he'll be out. He'll report to you guys, and then just basically went through that process. And ultimately, that's what he needed to hear. And 329 won't be accepted. 330 is the minimum cutoff. So he did 37 transactions in his first year, and 36 of those he collaborated with other people in the business. Wow. So basically worked with nearly every agent in the business to learn from them, how do they do a listing presentation? How do they do a campaign strategy meeting? How do they prepare for an auction? What do their vendor letters look like? All the different reports they do. How do they deal with a buyer? How do they lock them in? How do they negotiate? And so off the back of that, I think he wrote 650,000 in his first 12 months. So you can come into businesses like this if you're hungry, you've got the desire, humility, for him, because he owned multiple restaurants, he had lots of relationships. So he knew a lot of people, so he just leveraged those relationships, created the opportunities, brought other people to the table to help him joint list them, was prepared to share, and that obviously set him up.
Sounds like collaboration and having that humility to collaborate a bit of a recipe that you follow. Yeah.
Whereas most businesses are individual silos. They don't talk. Most people are afraid to actually talk with agents next to them in most businesses because they'll cut the legs out from under them, they'll hear something, so it's the wrong environment. You look at some of the best performing sports teams in the world, they all work together. And you can look at teams like Manchester United, like ultimately David Beckham had to go. So the team is never bigger than one individual. So the strength of the team comes from when they all work together, they've all got each other's back, they support each other. And once you start getting people that feel that they can operate outside of that, or they're better than everyone else, that's when it breeds a bad culture, and you just got to keep people in check. So,
how quick are you to fire?
Depends on what it is. So there are certain things within the business that would be a one strike, and then there's plenty of others where people make mistakes, and you got to learn from them. And I remember listening to a podcast a while ago of a business where it might have been Amazon, I think, something like that, and someone had made a mistake, and it had cost them $600,000, and they end up saying to the CEO, "Well, shit, are you going to fire them now?" I said, "Why would I fire them? I just spent $600,000 training."
Well
so
said.
now they're going to take that to another business, and so ultimately people will make mistakes. If they continue to make the same mistake over and over again, then there's a problem. But if people make mistakes, you want to be able to own them, share them across the business so everyone has the learnings from them. It's not to humiliate anyone, it's about actually having shared learnings. How as a group do we make sure that we don't make that mistake again? Same reason why I have 2 in-house lawyers and a legal assistant in the business. I don't know too many businesses that do that in this industry, but so that we're on top of compliance. Everything is the best that it can be to avoid having mistakes, to avoid challenges, to avoid litigation, to make sure that the experience for everyone is done to the best standard that it possibly can.
Do you know what I'm quite fascinated about now, just hearing you talk, is your mindset and mentality is very well curated. Like, it sounds like you've done a lot of self-development and strategically built this framework, systems, procedures, humility, integrity, as well as collaboration. Where does that come from? Were you mentored? Did you go out and see? Like, how did you?
There's obviously a lot of things that you pick up along the way. I guess one thing that has always been inside me, I've never been greedy. I enjoy the process. I enjoy helping people. I have no attachment to the fee. I get paid well, but I don't have any attachment to it until the deal's done. Doesn't mean I'm not going to fight for it or negotiate hard for it, but whether the deal happens or doesn't happen, it doesn't make any difference to me until it actually has occurred. So I sat there when I came back in 2016, and I had that listing that I sold for $25 million at Tidemark, and they'd taken it to tender with another business, Ray White, and they went through this big marketing campaign. They spent about $150,000 on a national campaign, and they, as I understand it, they had 12 inspections through the process generated from the campaign. They had offers on the property from 11 million to 17 million. They got to the end of the campaign. They said, "Well, we've exposed it nationally. We've spent all this money. This is the highest offer. It's worth 17 million. If you want to sell, that's what you got to do." And he came to me and said, "Mike, it cost me 16.8 million to build the structure, plus the land content, et cetera, And I said, "Look, that's fine. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to go through a similar process again," and we did. We rested it for a little bit. Spent 120 grand on marketing, uncovered a lot of buyers. I spent the time educating the buyers on the value, the replacement cost, the land sale rates per square metre, so they could understand and appreciate it. And then through that campaign, the highest offer that I had in the first 4 weeks or 5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, was $20,500,000. And and the seller wanted 21.5, was his bottom line on the Form 6, but then he had a tiered structure above that. And we were sitting there and he was looking at it and he was thinking about taking it. And I said, mate, don't take it. He said, what do you mean don't take it? I said, don't take it. I'm sure we can do a lot better than this. However, with all the parties that I'm currently dealing with, we need to continue marketing. So I'm going to need another 40,000 off you and another 4 or 5 weeks of your time. And we'll continue this process because I don't believe we've extracted every dollar out of all the people that are here. We still had multiple people we were dealing with. We wanted to create a competitive environment. And so we continued down that path. And he said, just let me be clear. If I sign this, you're going to make somewhere in the vicinity of 600 grand. You're telling me not to sign it. So that's exactly what I'm telling you telling you to do. Because ultimately, if you do sign it, I don't think it's a pivotal sale in the market. The highest sale price on the Gold Coast since 2009 had been 13.25, which was the one that I'd done a couple of months earlier. Prior to that, when I'd had 5 years off, the highest sale price on the Gold Coast had been 8.6. Wow. So I said, this here is a sale that will anchor the market. It's really critical, and we need to make sure that we achieve the right price for it. And we end up selling it 4 or 5 weeks later for 25 million.
25.
So he picked up another 4.5 tax-free. And
holy smokes.
But it's having the courage to know, and also the market knowledge and confidence to know that. So
and
I spent a lot of time with a lot of parties that I was dealing with that could write the check many times over, but had to just educate them on the value, and that property now would be worth somewhere in the vicinity of 70 million.
Gee, 70 million. Yeah. At what point in your journey does the fulfillments, where did you hit not max capacity? At what point do you feel like you're fulfilled enough versus there's a point where you've got to achieve financially, business, where you feel that security and comfort, if that makes sense? It's a bit...
I don't have $1 of debt these days, so I don't owe anything on anything. I could probably go a lot further, a lot quicker if I did, but my appetite for risk is not what it was when I was 12 foot tall and bulletproof in my 20s. I learned a lot of lessons on the way through, so now I'm quite happy and comfortable just operating the way that I do with a number of investments, no debt, a really good business and good cash flow. And so I don't have that as a determining factor. I just get up and come to work because I enjoy it. And I drive hard because I enjoy it. And so it's, I think there's different things that motivate me. I don't like being under pressure or stress from that side of it where you're financially running the gauntlet and things could go wrong that completely cripple you. Like, I've got a responsibility to 140 people out there and their families to make sure that the business survives. And if something, most of the systems and processes we're developing is what happens if I get hit by a bus. Touch wood again. But how do we make sure that the business lives on for all these other people? And it's having that mindset, and for your family. And I don't know, there are always things that I've thought about. But we have fun. Probably the greatest achievement for us over this last 5 years was our community fund, which we set up. So I managed to get the team to agree that 1% of every dollar that comes into the business goes into a community fund before any commission splits. Wow. So we roughly get somewhere in the vicinity of $500,000 a year that we put into that. We sponsor all the sports clubs, we sponsor the surf clubs, we sponsor the soccer clubs, we sponsor the AFL, the rugby clubs, the schools, and then the rest of it we put towards things like we bought vans for the cancer ward at the hospital so they can transfer chemo patients from their home to the hospital. We had one recently where a lady couldn't pay all her medical bills. Her father had killed her mother and set her on, doused her in petrol and set her on fire and burnt the whole house to the ground, and her kids in it at the same time. And she'd sort of jumped out the window, and it was a tragic story, and couldn't save the kids, and he ended up in a mental institution. But she had 3rd-degree burns and couldn't afford it, so we paid all her medical bills. We sponsor the Gold Coast show so that it can still be free admission for everyone. We serving our people. We're the naming rights on the annual ball there. So this year we raised $1,049,000 for serving our people, which helped all the homeless. I sit on the advisory board there, which feeds 5,500 people a week in the free supermarket that's been built by serving our people. We then managed to get one of the developers that came to our ball involved in it. He saw the initiative. We managed to bring the awareness to it, and he donated an apartment unencumbered, which is probably worth somewhere between 1.3 to 1.5 million that they are then going to raffle so they can try and start their own sort of Your Town RSL Art Union type of thing where they can. The key is how do we get to a point where some of these charities can do what they need to do without having to go and keep tapping the public to fund it. So for them to do what they need to do at a scale, they probably need to raise 4 or 5 million a year in donations. So how do we actually start to make that? So so they've been some of the really exciting things that we've been able to do. The team get to go down at Christmas time and stand there and feed the homeless, and the fulfilment that you get out of those things is phenomenal.
For sure.
We brought another one of our clients and a personal friend of mine into that organisation through our awareness, and he's a local dentist. We had a homeless guy there who had all of his teeth knocked out, or his jaw was all completely sort of disaligned from when he was beaten by his father so much as a kid, and so everyone thought he was a druggie and he struggled to keep or maintain any work. So he went, Tom Shao, who was the dentist there, managed to get him to go and rebuild his entire jaw and veneers and everything else, and free of charges, and so help that guy back into the workplace. Like just things like that give you amazing fulfillment, and that's been one of the real key things that have made me extremely proud of. We have a board of 7 of us, which we spill that every year, and everyone gets to apply for it, and we've got rules on where we put it so that it goes to areas that are going to have the most value and help and support people that can't. Like we don't want to give it to big faceless charities that are paying for offices in Martin Place, Sydney, and it goes to their rent or things like that. We actually want Gold Coasters helping Gold Coasters, and so that's been really exciting. So we've made a big difference there. We built a classroom for an autistic school up in the back here. Lots of different things that we've been able to help.
Sounds like you've done a lot.
It's amazing how far the initial 500 a year goes, but then amplifying the relationships, how far that's then taken it. So it's exciting. So
How do you keep so many spinning plates up in the air without letting them drop?
lots of good people. So people just need to, within the organisation, they all have to understand what their roles and responsibilities are. You've got to empower them to do it, and if you've got the right people with clarity, you can get the results. So.
Because, like, from my perspective, being 26, looking where you are, you've achieved a lot. You've got a lot happening at once. What would be your best advice to somebody in my position that would aspire to get to what you've achieved?
Start with the end in mind.
Start with the end in mind.
Where do you want to go? What does success look like for you? So you need to understand, if I'm to get there, what does it look like? How does it feel? What have I achieved? So if you know what that is, then you can reverse engineer everything to get there, and you can move through it a lot quicker. So,
What's your end goal?
Look, I think I've achieved it. There's so much more I could do, but I'm actually quite happy with what we're doing. Maybe we'll go to multi-office over the next 12 to 18 months on the coast, and a larger market share, but got a really good balance at the moment. So people have always said, why don't you take your brand into state, and why don't you do this, and why don't you go there? And I actually enjoy the pace in which I work at, the people that I work with, the balance that I can still have within my home life and my health and family, and it's all at a level that I'm thoroughly enjoying. And I have no doubt I could go and do a lot more if I really wanted to, but am I doing that for me? Am I doing that for the ego? Or ultimately, I'm very happy with the way things are. So I can do better here, and maybe we'll expand through Southeast Queensland, but not whilst the business is as reliant on me. So as we get more sort of senior support, I've just put on a new COO recently, Ben. So he's helping me now operationally and running the business a little bit leaner and growth strategies. And so So he was the former CEO of Stone and Wood for the last 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Took that to a $600 million trade sale. He's got really good business acumen. So bringing people like that in around us is going to help. So you've just got to get the right resources and people with skill sets that either you don't have or in areas that you don't have the time to, or that may not be your flame work. There's things that I don't really enjoy doing. I do them because I have to, but I like to put my time and energy into things that excite me. But start with the end in mind.
Would you give the same advice to your son, who's 18?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what does success look like? What do you want to do with your life? Forget about everyone else. Forget about what other people think of you or what their expectations are. It's your life. What is it that you want to do? And if you had no limitations, nothing holding you back, what would that be?
Viewer question.
Looks like I'm going to get a pen and paper out tonight.
I know. I'm going to have to re-listen to this one. What was the transition like from being an agent to running your own office?
It was interesting. When I had 5 years off, I did a lot of work in different business sectors whilst travelling and doing other things. So it gave me a lot of exposure to capital raising and growth on startups and different things that I was involved in. So that in itself was quite good for building a brand and a business like this. Where not to compromise, where to put your time, where to put your energy. Everyone focuses on making sure they've got the most operationally perfect business in the world, but you can spend all your time making things too perfect as well. So where do you put your time and energy so that you're going to get the most value out of it, the best return on your investment, or the best return on your time? So that's probably one of the most important part. And look, the people make the business. I'm fortunate that all these people make me look good. Ultimately, they are the business. I'm just fortunate enough that I get to lead them, but a lot of them are extremely good at what they do. They've got great work ethic, really good disciplines, and they perform really well.
Another viewer question. Pros and cons to being an introvert in real estate, and how to excel as an introvert in real estate.
I find most of the really good agents actually are introverted, like myself. You don't mind talking about things that you are passionate about and that you understand, but put you into a set of circumstances where you don't, you can be quite introverted. So it's interesting. They don't necessarily talk as much. They listen well. They are more humble. Lack ego in a lot of, like, they can be quite competitive, but they lack ego. So you look at some of the really top performers around the country, and most of them would be, I believe, very humble and introverted and happy to help. You will occasionally get some that are sort of mid-tier that might be a little bit egotistical and narcissistic and spend all their time on TV shows and with the greatest respect, some of them wanting to get on every single podcast they can for their own benefit, rather than genuinely trying to give back and help people. Like, you have a social corporate responsibility to give back and help others, and you've got to remember that all those people that did the same to you on the way through, and so I think give without expectation of receiving, but also understand that the more you give and the more people you help, and without expectation, it actually will usually come back in spades. So, and it's counterintuitive. People struggle to comprehend that until you do it. I remember listening many years ago to Tony Robbins that used to say that, and everyone goes, "How's that work?" I don't get it, but it's not until you realise the more you give. Like the community stuff that we do it without expectation. The amount of business that comes back to us as a result, because people see that, is fantastic. But that's a bonus. It's not why we do it. So
It comes
it's
back in spades.
and same with the people that you work with. Like, ultimately, the more you collaborate, the more you have each other's back, the more you support each other, the more you do the right thing, then you get this abundance mindset, and it keeps coming around. However, people can sometimes lose sight of that, and then they start to think that it's all them, and then they stop doing the things that got them there, and before they know it, their results start to decline. So.
Well said.
Very well said.
Well, my last question for you, a little bit of a personal one. What would be the best piece of advice your dad used to give you that sticks with you now? The first thing that comes to mind, don't overthink it.
Yeah, look, I was quite young. My dad was a bit old school back then, so, but I think he probably, like, for me, it was more around morals, respect. You only have your word. Like, if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. Follow through on it. And if you can't, make sure you tell someone. If something happens that is going to stop you from honouring your word, you need to actually own all of your results and responsibilities. So they're probably the few things. Like, he used to read a lot of self-help mental books back then that I recall, but they're probably the main things. Like, you've got your integrity, you've got your morals, and you know what? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but if you can actually honour that always, things will always play out the way that it needs to. Complete ownership over your results.
One last question from a viewer. Is he a cat or a dog person?
Interesting. We've got 2 cats at the moment, but we also used to have dogs as well. So we've got cats in the apartment these days, and then we used to have dogs at our house. So love them both for different reasons.
Does the Aston Martin count as one or the other?
Well, mate, look, thank you so much for jumping on. We really, really appreciate it, and many congrats on building a amazing business.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming up and making the trip.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.